everyone, I really cannot wait to talk about Scott Snyder's Justice League. Oh boy, is there a lot of stuff in there that I want to cover. But before we jump into any of that, we have to jump back to the event that kickstarted Scott Snyder's Justice League. Today, we're talking about Dark Knight's Metal, which, first and foremost, is the least concise name you could ever give to an event. Like when you name a book Crisis on Infinite Earths, alright, I got a pretty good feel for what's going to go on in the story. So your scope's the entire multiverse, there's going to be something bad happening, alright, gotcha. But what the hell is Dark Knight's Metal? That would be like naming Throne of Atlantis Justice League Water. And that's not even mentioning the confusing surname, because it's not DC's metal, it's not Batman metal, it's not even Justice League metal, it's not Dark Knight metal, it's not Dark Knight metal, it's not Dark Knight's metal, it's not even Darker Knight's metal, and it's certainly not Darkest Night metal. It's Dark Knight's Metal. And wow, is that a confusing name. But anyway, to understand the significance of metal at the time, we have to go back and set the stage, because the DC before Dark Knight's Metal is a mess. Now that being said, the DC after Dark Knight's Metal is also a mess, but we'll get to that. Flashback to 2011 with the New 52. The New 52 was DC's decision to relaunch their entire line to make it easier to understand for new readers. Because sure, if you're on issue 900 of Superman, it might be a little intimidating to go through 1 through 899. So not only did DC reset all of their books back to issue number 1, they tried to make everyone's backstory easier to understand. And well, that just did not happen. For example, DC thought Batman's crime-fighting career would be easier to understand if it all occurred within the span of 5 years. So within 5 years of time, Batman started his war on crime, developed the entirety of his rogues gallery, spent an entire year finding this guy known as the Holiday Killer, spent all of next year trying to find the second Holiday Killer, except this now happened during the exact same year while he was trying to find the first Holiday Killer, trained Dick Grayson to become Robin, got his back blown out by Bane, recovered from his spinal injury, trained a second Robin, mourned the death of his second Robin, rebuilt Gotham after it was decimated from an earthquake, trained a third Robin, fought off his second Robin who has now come back from the dead, spent a year off from being a superhero, had a child, died, came back to life, and trained his child, who is now 10 years old, to become his fourth Robin. Also, in somewhere in there, he trained 3 Batgirls, the first of which now isn't a cripple anymore, founded the Justice League, and created an International League of Batman. And all of this takes place within 5 years. But somehow this isn't even the worst part of the New 52. Now don't get me wrong, the New 52 did a lot of good for a lot of new readers. In terms of getting people interested in comics, it was a complete success. But it completely disenfranchised long-term fans. And yeah, there was a lot of great books that came out of the New 52, but I think a lot of people confuse the presence of good books with the New 52 being a good decision overall. I mean, these great writers were gonna put out good stories no matter what. That doesn't just make the reboot itself a good idea. Because by cramming in all these stories into 5 years worth of time, a lot of characters' histories got lost. This was the period where DC wanted their heroes to be more friends than actual family, which even though that was their stance, they were honestly more often enemies than even friends. Take Martian Manhunter, who is commonly referred to as the heart of the Justice League. He's a peaceful alien from the planet Mars. But in the New 52, he has to
kill all the Justice League because they're from Earth and I hunt men because that's in my name. Arr.
So yeah, DC did a lot of damage. And then Jeff Johns comes along with the DC Rebirth Initiative and says, hey, let's bring the heart and connection back to these stories. And for a short while, it worked. But as Johns got busy with other projects, Rebirth was losing wind. It was over a year since Rebirth started, and we still had no follow-up from the cliffhanger and the one-shot that kicked off the initiative. So DC forgot about keeping their books in line with what was set up in DC Rebirth. It was like the second coming of the New 52. And along comes Dark Knight's Metal. Now at the time, this just seemed like a cash grab summer event to fill in the gap before Johns capped off his Rebirth stuff with Doomsday Clock. But then it came out, and it was really good, which just honestly shouldn't be possible. Now, Snyder and Capullo are a great creative team. Their Batman run during the New 52 was probably the thing that single-handedly made people believe the New 52 was a good idea. But even though the creative team was solid, this book just came out of nowhere. The Rebirth one-shot set up all this stuff about Dr. Manhattan and the Watchmen universe, which was all teased in the Button crossover and future stuff. And right before Johns released Doomsday Clock, which was the epic confrontation between Superman and Dr. Manhattan, along comes this book about Batman and something called the Dark Multiverse. There was absolutely no build-up. It had nothing to do with what was going on in any of these other books. And even if the concept sounded cool, DC had a pretty bad track record with event books. I mean, in the New 52 we got Convergence and Future's End. Truly infuriating books. But I think the event that sums up what DC events were all about was the one that took place before Dark Knight's Metal. And that's Justice League versus Suicide Squad. No person was asking for this. No person ever asks for any of these events. It's a story about the Justice League versus the Suicide Squad, except the two have barely met each other yet. Really, it was just a ploy for DC to advertise the Suicide Squad right before the movie. I guess they thought the movie would make people interested in comics somehow, but that's all events were. Ways for DC to make money. Here is what an event is. Hey, that book you're currently writing? Stop writing that! Instead, I want you to write about how the Justice League is battling with the Suicide Squad. If your book features a member of the Justice League, talk about how they're affected by the event. If your book features a member of the Suicide Squad, make up some story that makes them more integral to the main book. What if my title doesn't feature any characters on either team? Great, so in your case, your character is going to accidentally run right into the battle in Washington, D.C. and have to fight off the rest of the Suicide Squad. But my book is set in space. No, it's set in Washington, D.C. Look, why would the Doom Patrol have anything to do with either of these two teams? Doesn't matter. We just need people to buy the event, which won't have most of the fucking plot in the book, so people will go buy the tie-ins. But people don't like the tie-ins. Correct, but they buy them. And then we're gonna set up 5 new titles that spin out of this book for people to pick up for 10 issues before they get canceled. Justice League vs. Suicide Squad is more of an ad than it is a story. They exist to make money, to tie into other books, and to set up new series for you to buy. I mean, that's what events are. The character interactions didn't matter, all these classic heroes and villains acted like they didn't know each other, it was just to sell more comics. But Snyder comes up with the revolutionary idea of, hey, Batman and Superman? What if they actually enjoyed being around each other? And what do you know, when you actually make these characters who live in the same universe actually have feelings about each other, it makes for a good event. Snyder ignores all this heroes can't be friends crap. Instead of pretending that these characters have never met each other, he just says fuck it and says everything from before the New 52 is canon. Batman and Superman are actually going to act like friends. Whatever's going on in the other Batman and Justice League books of the time, let's address that too. These separate but similar parts of DC's past, yeah, let's bring those together. This event is a continuity nerd's dream. It is the antithesis of the New 52. Metal actually celebrates DC's rich history. In like issue 1 alone, we have the Justice League fighting Mongol on World, who's teamed up with the Toyman, where one of the characters makes a reference to Aquaman's hook hand from the 90s until they pull out the cover of Grant Morrison's Multiversity and meet Dream of the Endless. And then, you get the Blackhawks. Ooh, name drop Barbados. Bam, Chrono reference. Remember Martian Manhunter? He's fucking back. Remember how Darkseid's a baby? Cause we do too. Do you know what's going on with Mongol after his recent appearance in Green Lantern? Because we fucking do. Now, if you know nothing about comics, that probably doesn't mean anything to you. But if you know a lot about DC history, oh, is it satisfying. But before I jump into my deepest, darkest opinions on this book, let's try and summarize the plot here. Now, a lot of people say that Metal is this book that you can just turn your brain off to and just sit back and enjoy. Well, alright, you kinda can. There are 2 ways you can summarize Metal. First, there's the Mega Weenie Hut Jr. version. It's Batman wielding an axe while he's fighting a bat demon until he and the Justice League defeat him through the power of friendship. Then there's the big boy way to read this book, which basically requires you know every piece of detail about the DC universe. Like if you've read Final Crisis, Multiversity, Crisis on Infinite Earths, The Sandman, like 50 issues of Scott Snyder's Batman run, and this one really obscure Batman comic from the 90s, I mean, this book assumes you understand how the fuck Hawkman works, so it's asking a lot. But if you can somehow manage to understand this abrasive amount of DC continuity and Metal, there's actually like a 60% decent story in here. The continuity is the part that makes this event so awesome. It's a payoff for all these comics that you thought would never come up again. But before we jump into how much I feel about this thing, let's actually try and make coherent sense out of what happens here. So Bruce Wayne has a secret and he's keeping it from the Justice League. So much so that he threatens Aquaman's entire city if he doesn't stay away. Now there are many bad ways to write this story. Snyder could just make this a story about how Batman can't trust anyone and pushes others away, but Tom King was too busy doing that with his run at the time. Instead, Snyder's Batman is actually reliant on others and treats them with kindness. He just genuinely believes that the secret is so dangerous that he doesn't want anyone else to get involved and get hurt. So Hal Jordan gets sent by the big brain Smurf cabal to go investigate the Batcave while Bruce is away. And who does he run into but Duke Thomas, who is obviously in limbo at the Batcave because none of the other writers want to bring him out into an actual mission. So the two travel into a Batcave inside the Batcave and find the Joker chilling out. Now this is a little concerning because the Joker is presumably dead after Batman Endgame. So that means Batman's been keeping the Joker in a secret prison for some reason. And this all ties into what Bruce has been doing in secret for the past few years. He's been researching a mystery that goes way back to the beginnings of time. Back when there were only 3 clans among men. The Birds, the Wolves, and the Bears. Snyder reveals that Hawkman was actually a descendant of the Bird tribe. But there was a secret 4th tribe known as the Bats that came along and killed everyone. So Bruce goes digging into the Tomb of Hawkman where he encounters the Court of Owls, which were an amazing creation by Scott Snyder, who now only exist to die at the start of every story arc they appear in. But not this time, because the court has secretly been planning to make Bruce a conduit for an ancient demon from another multiverse. Some might even say, a dark multiverse. Throughout Snyder's entire run, the Court has exposed Bruce to a plethora of different metals, including nth metal and Batmanium? Which once he's exposed to all these special metals, he'll be teleported to the dark multiverse and swap places with Barbados. Now I've got a whole video talking about Barbados, but he's basically the Grim Reaper but for bats. So he brings along a few friends with him and oh, would you look at that, the Court of Owls are fucking dead. The fucking leadership vacuum in that organization is just absurd at this point. Anyway, Barbados brings with him his Dark Knights, the whole reason for this confusing event title. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Dawnbreaker, Bruce Wayne, but when his parents got murdered, he received a Green Lantern ring and capped the fuck out of their killer. He's into emo music and he's bony as fuck. The Devastator. What if Superman went so crazy that the only way Batman could defeat him was by mainlining the Doomsday virus? This is the Batman v Superman Batman if he were any bit of cool. The Merciless. Bruce Wayne, but he becomes the God of War after the death of Ares. Gosh, this one is so fucking cool. The Drowned, aka Bryce Wayne. After the gender-bent Catman dies, Bryce swears vengeance on all metahumans. The Drowned likes long walks on the beach and systematically purging the earth of all people with superhuman abilities. The Red Death. What if Batman run fast? If you like the Red Death, good, because he eventually becomes a good guy in this story. The Murder Machine. He's Batman, but he really, really likes Alfred. So he makes a whole bunch of nano-Alfreds to enslave the universe. And of course, the Batman Who Laughs. What if the Batman was infected by the Joker toxin? Taking the bronze for most appearances and taking the fucking 10th metal super armor for most appearances in books he has no right being in, enjoy him while you can because he gets old quick. So you see, the Dark Multiverse doesn't have the order of the 52 Earths of the multiverse. It's a place where worlds are born out of the fears and nightmares of the inhabitants of the multiverse. So all these Dark Knights, they're evil versions of Bruce bred out of his greatest fears. So their goal is to kill the multiverse. Then it's to plunge the multiverse into the Dark Multiverse. Then it's to invade the multiverse. Then it's to kill the multiverse again. It's like the bad guys win at the end of each issue, so they have to keep coming up with ideas of how they can win more. So now that Barbados is here, cut over to the Immortal Men, which are a group of DC's immortal characters with great names like Ra's al Ghul and Vandal Savage. And also characters like Immortal Man. I mean, they really aren't all named equal. And the Immortal Men's idea is to strap the Anti-Monitor's brain to a rocket and fire it into the Dark Multiverse, which is the most metal and fucking unreasonable answer you could ever have in this current situation. But don't worry, because they won't show up again for the rest of this event. But my gosh, were they a cool idea. And even though this is only about a few issues into it, the story kinda wraps itself up from there. Batman and the Justice League battle it out with Barbados, guess who fucking wins, and the multiverse is back to order. But truthfully, I absolutely love this book. It's everything an event should be. It's fun, it's important, I mean even the tie-ins are good. Bats Out of Hell, maybe a 5 out of 10, but the rest are phenomenal. The Dark Knights one-shots, Batman Lost, like 20 pages total from Gotham Resistance, Dark Knights Rising Wild Hunt, which is just as confusing a name as the main event. Each of them enriches the story. In fact, if you actually want to see the Dark Knights besides the Batman Who Laughs do anything, it's almost necessary to read some of these tie-ins. But they're good, and the Dark Knights are awesome. You see, Metal is a direct commentary on DC continuity. Barbados and his Dark Knights are basically a stand-in for DC editorial. I mean, the whole plot of this book kicks in when Dream realizes that the greatest stories in the multiverse are all dying. All this history is actively being erased. It's just like the New 52, all the character interactions and relationships were actively dying. And the Dark Knights are the ultimate showcase of DC realizing that everyone's obsessed with Batman. Every event is about Batman, every crossover has Batman at the center, there's 10 times more Batman books than there are any other main DC character, there's Batman toothbrushes, there's Batman mugs. If they rebooted the Justice League book, they'd probably call it Batman. And oh yeah, the Justice League are there too. Everything from the New 52 forward had to be about Batman. And the Dark Knights are this great metaphor for this oversaturation of Batman content. But even in this Batman event, Snyder celebrates his relationship with other characters. He gives Superman a chance to shine, he gives Wonder Woman a chance to shine, and the answer to stopping this army of evil Batmen is to instead join together and embrace other characters. It's about bringing back Plastic Man, it's about bringing back Mr. Terrific, it's about finally sidelining Cyborg and getting him back on the Teen Titans where he belongs. It's just refreshing after such a long spell of nothing in the universe feeling connected. Snyder was able to bring in all these concepts from his Batman run, and bring in all these current stories, and bring in all these concepts from Grant Morrison's work. And on the topic of Grant Morrison's work, there are a lot of people that claim that Snyder is just trying too hard to be Grant Morrison in this book. And that's a big disagree from me. This is the most Scott Snyder event I could possibly think of. I think just because Snyder shoots for high concept here, the people confuse that with trying to rip off Grant Morrison. But this book has all the strengths and pitfalls of a regular Snyder book. For one, the Batman Who Laughs. The idea of a Batman who gets infected by the Joker is a phenomenal concept. But the Batman Who Laughs is basically just the Joker with a Batman skin pack. No aspect of this character is actually Bruce Wayne. Now, there are a lot of allusions to him physically being Bruce Wayne. He'll mention how he has the evilness of the Joker combined with Batman's smarts, or how he thinks just like Bruce does. But he never shows any of this. There is 0% of Bruce Wayne inside the Batman Who Laughs, which is a shame because I think he's such a good concept, but I just don't think he's any different from the Joker in this book. And in Dark Knight's Metal, I mean, he never really gets any good moments. He was sold as this character we all liked before we even got a chance to like him. And I think the Batman Who Laughs represents a lot of problems with Snyder's writing. He's really wordy, but doesn't end up saying a whole lot of interesting things. I mean, Snyder is a master at pitches. His story ideas are really good. Every concept in Metal is amazing, but the execution can sometimes leave something to be desired. Take Barbados, who's a multiversal bat demon. How do you make that uncool? Well, you make sure the only thing he says is,
"All roads lead back to darkness,"
for the entirety of the book. And while Barbados is busy charging up his anti-life cover of Killing in the Name of, the Justice League is basically off on a fetch quest. Once you get to about issue 3 or 4 in any of Scott Snyder's stories, they stop having a story in them. The characters just kind of move from point A to point B without facing the main villain. I mean, it's pretty consistent. I think Snyder confuses plot and things actually happening. Like, sure, you can spend a whole issue with 3 teams splitting up and looking for clues, and that's a plot, but it feels like a malnourished skeleton of a script compared to having any serious tension or character interactions. But enough ragging on this thing. I love Dark Knight's Metal. It's not perfect, but it's a love letter to DC continuity and DC fans. It's over the top, it's awesome, and it's everything an event should be. Is it perfect? No. But does it have Batman riding a Joker dragon? Yeah, so you can only complain about the thing so much. And after Barbados is sealed away and the Batman Who Laughs sneaks away to plot his next 10 guest appearances, Bruce invites the League over to his house for dinner, because in their ultimate fight with Barbados, they broke the source wall, the barrier of the universe. And they just open up their world to a whole bunch of bigger threats. And by a whole bunch, he really means just one. But that's for another day. For now, Bruce invites the Trinity into his other room to unveil the new project he's working on. The blueprints for the Hall of Justice. That's right, guys. Snyder kicked off his run on a high note. Dark Knight's Metal was a story about not facing darkness alone and relying on your friends to get through difficult situations. And now that Batman and his friends are together, it's time to start Scott Snyder's Justice League. And I'll see you guys then. Hey guys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at InfinityInkCom1, and let me know how you guys feel about Dark Knight's Metal in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time.